Welcome to Living Teal, at the table with Fare, the destination to talk about anything and everything, but most of all food. Because we're here to make sure what you eat makes you feel great and never makes you sick. A seat at the table is brought to you by Fare, taking the fear out of food, one breakthrough at a time.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, no matter where you are. We're glad you're here with us today. I'm Jason Linde, and this is At the Table with Fare.
And I'm your co-host, Tiffany Leon, and today we're talking all things advocacy. And I know this is right up your alley, Jason.
It is, but you know, the wonderful thing about advocacy, Tiffany, is that it can happen at any level. You can be an advocate locally, like one of our guests, Maeve, will be, or you can be one nationally, like another one of our guests, Christina.
Yeah, that's true. I'm excited to hear more about Maeve's story. I know we had her at the college summit in the fall, and she was so inspiring that I'm glad we can have her back here. And Christina, I know that she's been doing a lot of work on the Hill, so we can get into that a little bit later, but it sounds like she is super busy.
Yeah, no, she really is. And we're just grateful to have them on Fares at the Table. I mean, this is going to be a fantastic podcast with a lot of takeaways for folks, both at the local level and at the national level, and really how you can make a difference around the country and in your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think being an advocate more on a local level is more my speed. I'm definitely one to, shoot an email over to a company when they've wronged me or contacted the manager. I've definitely done that if, a meal was bad or for another reason, someone got sick. But I would be interested, I'm very interested to hear more about her work, Christina's work on a national level. Because until I got to Fare, I never wrote to a congressman. I didn't really even know where to start. And I know that we had recently hosted the fly-in, and so I did learn a lot on that. But I'm just excited to dive a little bit deeper here.
Me too. So let's get started.
Yeah, so our first guest today is Maeve Willis. She is a huge advocate, as I've already said, and you'll hear me say it again. And we'll start off with the basic question. What food allergies do you have, Maeve?
Thanks so much, Tiffany. I'm allergic to peanuts, nuts, dairy, eggs, and seeds.
Wow. Boy, you've had to manage a lot with that. And Maeve, talk to me a little and talk to us a little bit about, what does being a food allergy advocate mean to you? This month is all about being an advocate. We believe you can be an advocate both locally, nationally, and everywhere in between. So share with us a little bit about what that means to you personally.
I think that's a really great point because when you take on something as massive as food allergies, it can really kind of seem intimidating to be a single person trying to enact macro change. And in particular, if you're not necessarily someone who thinks on that macro or national level, you may shy away from advocacy entirely. But micro advocacy is as necessary as macro advocacy. And so I think that it's as important to have those conversations with your local mom and pop shop around the corner as it is, when we're speaking about legislation that helps to advocate on a larger scale. So I think really advocacy can be what you make of it as long as you are someone who is willing to see a wrong and say something about it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I really love that approach. And it's just a great mindset to sort of encounter life with someone with allergies. Last year, you really stole the show at the Living Teal Summit. And can you share with our audience the story you told of your own advocacy efforts and sort of what happened? What was the problem? What did you encounter? And what did you do?
Absolutely. So one of my previous positions had me traveling quite a bit in the United States. And so getting comfortable with being on my own and advocating for myself in restaurants had to be something that I kind of learned for myself, right? And I ran into an unfortunate scenario where I did everything by the book. I asked the questions. I, alerted the servers, who then alerted the chef. A miscommunication happened. There ended up being some mustard in something that I ate. had a reaction. I went to the hospital, and I was lucky enough to be able to walk out, and I recognized that doesn't always happen. And what I recognized as well in that moment was that this was an opportunity not for me to search for any type of compensation that wouldn't actually, enact change down the road. This was a learning opportunity. And in the immediate conversation that I had the following day, actually, with that restaurant manager, the conversation was really centered around, okay, how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? We spoke, and then kind of recognized that restaurant was a part of a larger group. He connected me with someone who essentially ran the safety and compliance with that larger restaurant group. And so we then had several conversations over the following several months, which ultimately then meant that systemic changes happened. So at every restaurant now that is owned by that group, a server walks up to a table and says, "Hi, my name is X, and I would love to know if you have any food allergies," as the first question, which then makes it so that you are simply answering a question rather than the onus of advocacy kind of falling on the person who systemically is made to feel shame for feeling different, and essentially always kind of feeling like they have to ask for special accommodation. And that to me was a way to save hundreds, thousands of people, whatever that ultimately ends up being down the road, that will never interact with me, that will never interact with that manager. But that to me was an advocacy level that I was really excited about.
And what you accomplished is, it would take, if we're talking multiple areas, multiple states, would take, hundreds and hundreds of hours of legislation and meetings and committee hearings. And you did it all on your own. You turned this unbelievably negative experience into a positive one. And really, on behalf of the food allergy community, let me just pat you on the back and say thank you. You've accomplished something much more than a fleet of lobbyists did. And you did it in your own way. And it was fantastic. So, how did you find your way into convincing a corporation who own these franchises to change their policies? I mean, give us a little bit more about the actual nuts and bolts. You had mentioned that there had been a couple of conversations, but what were the things you were sharing with them? How did you help them understand that a change would be beneficial to them? And I'm just so amazed that you look for a constructive engagement with this organization the day after you went to the hospital. I mean, that to me is just, it really goes to your character and your spirit and your soul. But I'm just amazed by it all. So please share with us a little bit more.
Absolutely. I think that I have always been the type of person to recognize that responding to something traumatic or something negative with more negativity doesn't get us anywhere. It kind of perpetuates this almost idea that you are the only person that will then experience that negativity. And we know that isn't the case, right? Millions of people have food allergies, and issues of cross-contamination or poor practices are unfortunately commonplace. And the opportunity that I saw in that moment was that I didn't want that one server's mistake, that one line cook's mistake to cost them their livelihood. I would rather, since I was able to walk away from that experience, which again, I recognize that not all people are, I wanted to use that moment to create a larger movement and create more change, so that it was an educational opportunity rather than a punitive one. Because having been exposed to a really wide variety of ways that people learn, I understand that punishment doesn't work. Right, we're learning that in the school system right now, and there's really no reason for that to perpetuate in professional lives. And so I saw this really as an opportunity to say, okay, how can I, as one single person now, have a conversation that might save a bunch of people that would never actually get into this situation. It just so happened that the person that I spoke with, his I believe it was his daughter, it might have been his niece, also has food allergies, and she's relatively young, but had not yet progressed into this sort of advocacy sense as an adult that I've sort of had to grow into. And so he almost appreciated that this could be something that he found a family member having to deal with. And so as a result, it felt more like a collaboration rather than a complaint. And we kind of had some ideas going back and forth just to try and figure out how can we make sure that people don't die by going out to dinner.
That's amazing. That really is just amazing. And what was the breakthrough moment in those conversations, if I could just ask? I mean, I got to believe that from their end, they kept waiting for your attorney's letter to be received, and for them just to sort of, because clearly you had to warm them over. I mean, going in with your sort of let's fix this together mentality, as opposed to, hey, I told you this and now I'm seeking compensation, must have been just such a change from what they're accustomed to.
I think you're probably right. And I actually had several coworkers and friends kind of ask me when I was going to do the same. And I think I've kind of always had that approach where I would rather encourage change than to seek compensation myself. I'm not the type of person to try and get more out of the world than I originally intended. And so I didn't walk into that restaurant looking for a certain amount of compensation. I walked into that restaurant looking for dinner. And if I can make sure that the next time somebody else walks into that restaurant with the same challenges is able to ultimately walk out and not be wheeled out, that's a positive takeaway.
That's fantastic. What advice, Maeve, would you have for others in being a great advocate? I mean, what advice, guidance, suggestions? I mean, some of the things you've already talked about, being collaborative, being open, seeing yourself as an advocate as opposed to someone who you feel like sort of put aside or made to feel different. I mean, I think some of those you've underscored already and are just phenomenal, but what sort of practical advice would you have for, folks in their 20s, folks in their teens,
Mm-hmm.
and for being a better advocate?
I think that this necessarily has a different answer for someone who is an ally as opposed to someone who actually experiences this themselves. And so when you kind of consider food allergies as an invisible disability, there's quite a bit of shame associated with invisible disabilities that you appear, at least on an outward perspective, to be quote unquote fine, right? You all of a sudden could end up in some pretty tough situations, but it's not something that you necessarily quote unquote have to battle every day, right? And so there's kind of weird lenses that you have to wear as someone with food allergies, that this is almost a temporary disability in the sense that that you're not necessarily in anaphylaxis on a daily basis, and yet it is something that does impact you on a daily basis. And so I think as an advocate, as someone with food allergies, it really took me until my early 20s to understand that this was something that I needed to lead and almost had to accept any of the questions that I received, because those questions were coming from a place that would and could ultimately save my life. I think I have been asked the question, will this kill you? In almost a joking way, more often than I wish had happened, right? But if I don't answer that question, then I lose an opportunity to educate people. And so from my perspective, as someone with food allergies, I would encourage everyone with food allergies to lean into that opportunity to educate. It is ultimately frustrating to necessarily need to navigate that, that almost encouraged commentary on your disability, that if you had diabetes, if you were in a wheelchair, if you had some other type of disability, those questions wouldn't be present. So it's almost necessarily independent of those that are simply allies in the community. But for those that are allies, those that are parents, friends, teammates, whatever that might be, I would encourage you to primarily ask the person with allergies, how can I better help support you? Because if you are the type of person who speaks for someone with food allergies, you are perpetuating that that misunderstanding that you understand this invisible disability. And even if you are someone with a different disability yourself, that invisible sense is quite different than the visible disability. And as frustrating as that distinction is, it is necessary. And so asking that question is really important.
Yeah. So one more question before we leave. And if just, again, thank you so very much for sharing all of this with us. You know, you're a phenomenal athlete. I mean, you've been a competitive Irish dancer. You helped your college rugby team win the state championship. You have a degree in brain and cognitive science. You know, you've also faced a lot of challenges. You know, what you've learned from being this phenomenal athlete and picking up skills and discipline along the way, you know, can you share with us a little bit, Maeve, about how that would relate to being an advocate in everyday life?
Absolutely. I think that the biggest lesson that I have been able to learn over my extensive athletic career is that the daily discipline of things is where everything is won and lost, but it is not what is seen by everyone, right? You see the championship win, you see you perform a lift on a platform, you see you perform a dance on a stage, and it's quite easy to celebrate those big wins. Those big wins really are only possible if you set the discipline as the expectation on a daily basis. And I do think that the same is said for advocacy. If you are someone who is willing to have that conversation on a daily basis with yourself, as much as with the other people in your community, it's those small conversations that help to lead you to the mentality that's necessary to the understanding of the breadth and depth of a problem. And so I think that athleticism ultimately kind of has this opportunity to teach you that really advocacy is the same thing, because you are advocating for yourself as an athlete on a daily basis, because you set boundaries that encourage you to succeed. And I think the same thing is true within advocacy.
Oh, that's fantastic. It reminds me of this great book, Chop Wood, Carry Water by Josh Metcalf. He's an athletic mental trainer. And as you were saying about practicing and being an advocate, you know, speaking up for yourself on a daily basis, if you don't, or if you do, then someday you may have the same result that you encountered. By speaking up, you build those muscles, you build that mental resilience, and you're able to say to the server up front, this is my issue, and please make sure you address it. Maeve, where can people find you on social? Because it's been such a great conversation with you. Can you share with us your Insta or your Facebook or your Twitter handles?
Absolutely. My Instagram is the easiest way to find me, and that's at peanut 8.4.
Hold on, one more time, at
peanut 8.4.
I love that. There must be a reason behind that.
So the nickname was given to me of Peanut because I'm relatively a small stature. And when I kind of recognized that I had an opportunity to own my allergies, where I used to really feel shame about them, and Peanut became a way that I could kind of love and appreciate this side of me and lean in with a little bit more strength. I've been going by Peanut for nearly a decade now.
Well, we love this story, and we love you, Maeve. Thank you so very much for being on with us today. We've really appreciated it. And you have a great rest of your advocacy month and advocacy life. We are so inspired by you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, we're now really happy to introduce you to Christina McCauley. Christina is Congresswoman Doris Matsui's Senior Healthcare Policy Advisor, and she joins us today to talk a little bit more about advocacy at the federal level. Welcome, Christina. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jason. I am well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're really happy to have you. Hey, so Christina, tell us about yourself a little bit and how did you get involved with food allergies?
Well, I am Christina McCauley. I am the Congresswoman's Senior Policy Advisor. Congresswoman Matsui is a Democrat from Sacramento, California. I found myself involved with food allergies because the Congresswoman has a grandson who has a peanut allergy. So one of her priorities as a senior member on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a House committee that handles healthcare issues, she started working with the advocates at FAIR to introduce this legislation to improve food allergy research and funding and all we need to know about finding a cure for this. So I primarily work on that issue for her, and that's how I got involved in this.
Well, it's fantastic. And, you know, you certainly have an interesting day job. And as a former congressional staffer, I know it's also a night job quite often. So how did you end up working for Congresswoman Matsui? I mean, you know, we always hear about how hard it is to land a job on the Hill and, you know, Capitol staff or sort of, you know, it's a unique position. So talk to us a little bit about, you know, how you got there.
I got there. I drank a lot of coffee. I had a lot of coffees, a lot of networking. So my background is in health policy. I got my first job out of graduate school here in Washington, D.C. I was working for a research firm at the time and was sort of just familiarizing myself with what is a health legislative assistant and the type of jobs that exist on Capitol Hill. So after a few years of learning all the wonky background to healthcare, I started having coffees. By that, I mean, I started networking and I found my way to the Congresswoman who, as I mentioned in my previous answer, she has a position on a committee that does a lot of healthcare work in the House. So for me, I was really interested in working for a member that had that clout and influence. And the Congresswoman also has been a member for 15 or so years at this time. So she's got so many healthcare issues to work on. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to convince someone to give me a chance here. And now I've been with the Congresswoman coming up on 2 years. So it is, the job is all I ever wanted and to much, much more and much later into the night than I ever anticipated.
Yes. And I should have mentioned at the outset that, you know, the food allergy community owes you and Congresswoman Matsui just an unbelievable amount of gratitude. Just for all of your hard work. If it wasn't for you and the Congresswoman, we would have never gotten the FASTER Act introduced, much less passed last year. And we've reintroduced it again this year. I know you've done that and helped us get co-sponsors. So, you know, you're kind of a food allergy advocate for us because you're at the national level, and this would be a huge piece of legislation that would make a tremendous difference for our community. You know, so what does being a food allergy advocate mean to you personally?
For me personally, being an advocate is, I think of myself as the liaison. You all are the real advocates, but you're right. We do advocate on behalf of this bill. The Congresswoman and myself have to, you know, we have to spend a lot of time talking this bill up to our colleagues. That's both at the staff level for me, and it's her down on the floor saying, hey, so-and-so, did you hear about my food allergy bill? Can you maybe give it a look? Can you maybe give it a co-sponsorship? And, you know, what we do is really coordinate your voices on Capitol Hill. You know, you bring us the stories, you bring us the need, you describe the problem for us. And, you know, our job is to be those problem solvers. So for me, that advocacy is, you know, I pick up where you all meet me and I try to take it across the finish line, and the Congresswoman's in the same boat. So, that is, I think that's it. Yep, that's what I do.
Well, my dog is in full support of all of your work. I don't know if you could hear her in the background, but she was very excited to hear about all of that.
Haven't. And we love yips of enthusiasm, frankly.
Yes, she's very excited.
We could stand for some more. Hey, Christina, one last question before Tiffany jumps in here. What have you learned or seen about the food allergy community over these past few years, now that we've been working together on FASTER? I mean, obviously, you know, you glossed over a lot of the great work you've done prior to coming there. I know you worked hard to get that master's in health policy, and I know that's a heavy lift. But what have you learned about us, and and sort of where do you see us going forward? Hopefully, after FASTER becomes passed and signed into law by the president.
Definitely. I think when I think back to the last 2 years, two particular things stick out. One is certainly I have a new understanding and appreciation for how food allergy families live every single day. This is not an issue that you just think about every once in a while when you want to get engaged in politics. I mean, for food allergy families, this is your life. This is the decisions you make about school and camp for your kids, or going to a party, or, just getting on a plane, like go into an event of any sort. This is an every single day thing for our food allergy families. And I hear that in the advocacy, and I hear that in these meetings, and I hear how that story is being told on Capitol Hill. I think the other thing I'll mention and add is I recall us having a conversation about a year ago when the pandemic first became, social distancing, and then the lockdowns, and the concern about, is it safe for my family to go to the hospital if there's a food allergy reaction? If we're ordering in all the time, can we go to the grocery store? This time continues to be difficult for many Americans, but food allergy families have unique challenges, and they've also have a lot of resilience. And so those are two things about this community that I've certainly learned during my time in the Congresswoman's office.
Yeah, we recently hosted our fly-in, and we had constituents from all over meeting with their congressmen. And I know that can be intimidating, although talking with you seem super friendly, and maybe I wouldn't be as scared. But do you have any advice or any guidance for our listeners as they continue their work in advocacy on the FASTER Act or any issue that they're interested in?
Definitely. For our folks that might be listening that did participate in the fly-in, or you've heard about it, I want to give some insight into what happened for me after you all had those meetings. And that was a lot of interest and a lot of emails. So I got, staff level reach out. Hey, my boss met with this family from our district who explained what this bill was. Can we get a copy of the text? Can you let me know what groups you've worked in on this? And what our job is we want to bring those folks on as co-sponsors. And that did happen. I was joking with Fair afterwards, my inbox is a little overwhelmed at this point with so many questions. So, my advice for advocates is take advantage of those opportunities and participate. A lot of times when you engage with a congressional office, you're going to get me. You might get the boss, but it's very, very likely that you'll get me, because that's my job, is to have all these meetings. But those meetings are so important to put issues on my radar, to make a personal connection with a constituent or an advocate on an issue. And I remember those things. I take that information, I take it to my congresswoman, and I say, I really recommend that we co-sponsor this bill. And that's really, how this all gets done. At the end of the day, we need bills that have a lot of support from a lot of members. And that starts with you all engaging in these meetings.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great advice, because I feel like some people feel like their voice isn't getting heard if they don't speak directly to the
no, that's definitely not the case.
Like you're a good advocate for our advocate. It's a chain reaction, but it sounds like it's getting the work done. So
I'm glad you said that, because I do think often if this is the first time you've engaged with advocacy and a member of Congress, I think that comes off that, the member didn't meet with me and therefore my issue must not be important. That couldn't be farther from the truth. The member's schedule, I have trouble getting on the schedule sometimes. Okay. And I work for her. So I say that to mean, they're going to votes all the time. They have other priorities or things that have to take time during their day. Frankly, it's always easier to get in with an office to talk to me. And again, my job is to have these meetings and take those issues to the congresswoman and let her know who you all are and what's important. So I really want to emphasize that for anyone that does this. A congressional staffer is a great entry into any office.
Yeah. Well, you've done such a fantastic job on this. I think the one last question I just would like to leave our listeners with, one more response from you, is, you helped us set up the Congressional Food Allergy Research Caucus, and just give us just a brief overview about what it is and how it works and how it will benefit our listeners going forward?
Absolutely. So a caucus is, I think before I worked on Capitol Hill, the best way I would think about that word is it's like a club. It's like a membership club within the House of Representatives. And so members will join those caucuses for issues that are important to them. So for the Food Allergy Caucus, what we do is we'll use that list and we'll use that membership as a way to talk about food allergy issues. Excuse me, Friday afternoon. So we will use that caucus to communicate information about this bill, the FASTER Act, or whatever we want to do next. What other federal food allergy policy issues exist for groups like FAIR. If you were to put on an event or you have some new information that you want members to know, we'll use our platform to get that out there. And so it's both a way for the members to engage with one another on the issue and to also stay in the loop. I'm on so many listservs and emails of different things my boss is a part of, and I really value that information when it comes across. And so it's a resource for both the members and congressional staffers. And we'll look to advocates to give us what do you want us to share? That's what we are. We're all liaisons at the end of the day. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, we couldn't do it without you, and we really appreciate it. And we also know that the caucus is going to help put pressure on the NIH and others to increase federal research into food allergies. And so it just serves so many different purposes. Well, Christina, thank you so much for being a new but dedicated and really great food allergy advocate. We wouldn't be this far without you, and we're just so grateful you're there for us.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you to all the advocates for food allergies as well. Again, we really couldn't do this work without you, so really appreciate it.